Kia ora, tana koutou katoa。好歡喜今日可以喺呢度咧同大家有分享嘅説話或者有分享嘅機會。I want to assure you I've been advised, I've been told to present in English, so don't worry about that. Max, I am incredibly humble before you. Thank you for your very, very kind introduction. I am incredibly humble before the audience as well because thinking about these topics on Asian gambling issues, I can easily think it is not an easy decision to surrender such a precious slot to these topics. You can have many other interesting topics on different population groups in the country. So I thank you for that. And also for the audience, I know very likely, very tempted, you chose not to come. A, you had such a wonderful conference dinner last night, and B, well, Asian gambling, well, maybe not my cup of tea, or, well, it's not really my topic. So thank you for being part of this shared learning community. I think it would be absolutely devastating to share with an empty room. So thank you, and thank you. Well, even this decision has passed all the hurdles, I can still think you have far better qualified people to take up this sport. I'm thinking our beloved John Wong. He is almost like our elder in the Chinese community. Give John a round of applause. Eh? And also, absolutely from the bottom of my heart, you can also equally invite someone like Dr. Elsie Ho, who is a clinical psychologist by training, and talk about the population, epidemiology, and gambling, and so forth. So again, I want to give my heartfelt thanks to the committee for allowing me to spend some time with you on these topics. To finish, I want to acknowledge the help that I received from Wan Lei in preparing some of my presentation as well. Here we go. I want to declare I have nothing to declare. I am not occupying any significant ongoing relationship of funding. The research funding that I received in the last 3 years are the following. The last one, I am the co-investigator of a work funded by the Jockey Club Charities Trust in Hong Kong. I did not even tell them I'm coming to present this paper, so no way they can influence my preparation and also delivery of this presentation. So rest assured. What I'm going to do in this less than an hour, I will be using a lot of images of iceberg to entertain you. In this talk, the iceberg, I'm using it on a couple of ways. Number one, let's look beyond the tip of the iceberg. Look at the sophistication, the dynamics, the interaction, and so forth. Number two, I want to invite you to regard iceberg as the iceberg of warning, iceberg of caution, that you and I need to change the course in order to avoid a disaster. Interestingly, when you think about iceberg, not often we realize there are a lot of goodies beneath the iceberg. I am told by the geography that, in fact, there are very many layers of ions. For example, when the iceberg travels, they release the minerals and feed the water. So there are goodies underneath the iceberg as well. So it's not only bad, and bad. Let's think about the iceberg as the community of practitioners. Let's think about iceberg as good data to inform our practices. The outline for the agenda is pretty much there. First things first, I want to talk about the context and also the caveats. In terms of caveats, number of things I want to let you know. Even though this morning I'll be talking about Chinese people, Asian, and so forth, I'm sure you are well aware, well informed. We are not talking about one single group, okay? We have Chinese from urban, from rural, new arrivals, and also no longer migrants. Come on, I am settlers, okay? I look very yellow. People may think I'm migrant, I'm visitor, but I'm also a settler as well. Caveat number 2, some of my material will be equally applicable across population groups, even though I'm very aware the Chinese, the Asian at the backdrop of my material. And also, I think the last caveat is important for me to say that even though I am here, it's too late, I'm not going back to my seat, but I want to acknowledge there is a great deal of wealth, a great wealth of expertise and also experience as well. Do you hear me? Okay, so I want to acknowledge that. I want you to join in some discussion later on. Well, with the caveats covered, I want to go and talk about the sort of context. The more I think about the topics, the conference theme, the iceberg, it is myself that I see. I see myself as a lonely iceberg without too much hair, traveling from Hong Kong to New Zealand and back to Hong Kong. I think in my life I make 2 good decisions so far, well, maybe 3. The first one is to marry my wife, okay? The second one is I came to New Zealand. I am absolutely grateful for the opportunities given to me through New Zealand, through my work, and also many, many opportunities. My third good decision was to return to Hong Kong because my mother was diagnosed dementia, and going back is able to share the care. I've been in New Zealand for 22 or 20 years because the 2 years in between, I traveled a lot between 2 places. When I first came, I was in the lovely, wonderful, amazing Dunedin, okay? And this is the lovely Octagon, the place we should go to. I enjoyed my 10 years there immensely. I underwent my training in psychology and also through my PhD in the Department of Psychological Medicine. Year 2000, we moved from Dunedin to Auckland, where I took up the position at the Auckland University. I want to acknowledge the training I underwent and supported by Professor Peter Adams, and also I work closely with my colleagues Fiona there, and my colleague Lisa somewhere up there as well. What I did when I was in New Zealand or in Auckland precisely, I worked part-time, honorary role at PGF. And this was the picture we took at my departure dinner. It is highly powerful. It's a picture to say, when you and I working as a practitioner, advocate for policy change to empower the community, what we seek to do is the following. Number 1, the mute will speak. Number 2, the blind can see. The problems I have, the help I can go to seek help. The third is the impaired can hear. And that is exactly what we are doing. And I'd like to encourage you to do exactly that. Well, things change. Look. Graham becomes Paula, and John becomes Kelly. And a lovely photo I took with Max when I had the departure dinner, and also our lovely Sulim there as well. It is not only I see when I think about the topics, me being the lonely iceberg, traveling between two jurisdictions. But also more when I think about the topic, it is the migrants, refugee, and migrant worker I am seeing. They look like the icebergs being displaced from where they belong, traveling to a place they found it very, very foreign. To have some background, we know India is the first migrant nation. On the planet, we have 16 million Indians traveling around the globe. Secondly is from Mexico, and then the third is from Russia, and then the fourth is people from China. We have 10 million people traveling around the world. No wonder why Chinese people have become one of the major minorities in their host country. Here is just some quick statistics about the situation, and we are seeing the projection of the New Zealand population by 2038. And so we are seeing a lot of overlapping ethnicity, so that's why they add up more than 100. And in particular in Auckland, we are talking about a very heaviest population growth, up to 2 million. And within this 2 million, we are increasing the Asian population from 1 in 4 in 2013, and up to 1 in 3 by the time of the year 2038. So I think it's absolutely legitimate for us this morning to spend some time on this topic. And also Chinese people age 65 will be increased by 4 times, comparing the figure between 2013 and also 2038. It's not only the migrant I see, it is also the refugee I see as well. New Zealand is part of the 26 countries participate in the United Nations for the refugees settlement program. And every year, New Zealand will take up to 750 people. So think about that. Every year, we have 750 new arrivals to the country. And it is something we should be aware. And as my narrative goes on for about a minute, the United Nations will tell us in that 1-minute episode window, there will be almost 20 people forcibly displaced every minute across the globe as a result of conflict and persecution. So folks, this is an important population we need to pay attention to. As Max opened the meeting, the gambling harm doesn't distribute randomly. There are some people are more vulnerable than others. The headline of the newspaper goes like this: refugees addict to gambling, alcohol, and spending all their money in one day. And also there was another heading from the South China Morning Post in Hong Kong. And when you think about this narrative, when you think about this expression, perhaps you can feel the power, as powerful as Rebecca yesterday keynote used a lot of first-person narrative. If a group of us goes to a public swimming pool or a library, people may question our presence, but not at the casinos. Think about it. We have the who, we have the what, we have the how, we have the when, perhaps daytime, okay? And also where as well. Library, swimming pool, I don't belong to there. Casino, I'm welcome. So perhaps that explains a lot why migrants and refugees are very much vulnerable to gambling activity. Pretty much sort of stop my context section. The tip of the iceberg, only a small part of a much larger problem. We should try to go and look a little bit deeper. What I'm trying to say here is based on quite an array of literature, we are able to draw the following observation. This is the work led by Nancy back to 2003, based on 96 people, very small sample, and indicative of up to 56% of refugees, in this case, Southeast Asian refugees. They belong to the pathological gambling category, alarming. The other three literature, it is by me working with John Wong and so forth. Based on our clinical services observation, we also talk about how the migrants, refugees, international students, for example, they are very much harmed by gambling. And then the fifth article, headed by Wilson, is using the material of the United Nations data, and they talk about the gambling affecting the second generation of migrants. Do I make sense? The first migrant, the first generation, they're doing quite well. Often they enjoy the model migrants or the healthy immigrants effect. But the second generation and so forth, they pretty much converge and they suffer from gambling harm from the rest, just like the rest of the population. And what I want to draw your attention is the last study. It was a study conducted in Italy, and based on quite a big sample. And they talk about, and they found the first generation young people at the age of 15 years old, they are 100% higher opportunities suffering from gambling problems than the rest of the population. So in other words, we are seeing the young migrants, in this case, the age 15, young people are susceptible to gambling problem. So tip of the iceberg, let's look beyond. They look like the model migrants. Let's look beyond. They look like healthy and wealthy. But in fact, they are also suffering from the gambling harm. What I would like to do now is to change the gear and to look at the first topics, tip of iceberg. In this case, will be Chinese Asian migrants and gambling. In this section, what I want to do are to cover three things. The number one things I want to cover is to argue with some data to assert that, in this case, Chinese people, they are affected by gambling disproportionately. Number two, what I will cover is to offer you two concepts, in my view, very relevant, very powerful, very useful to understand gambling among, or gambling problems among the Chinese, Asian, or even in some cases across population groups as well. Two concepts, two tools, and I will talk about that. And then the last one, I will spend time to examine, to make some speculation, if you like, between the mental health and gambling disorder. So those are the three things I like to cover. Well, if we look at this slide, you will see that it is the figure from PGF, is the national service statistics. In other words, it's covering the entire country. Based on the last report year data, they saw about 3,600 people. And within that, there was about 25% of clients identified as Asians, okay? Well, when you look at figures like this, we congratulate them because they have done so well, they outreach and work very hard to reach such a significant percentage of clients. But on the other hand, when you think about it, there is something truly alarming, because when you look at the national statistics of Asian, they are sort of around the mark of 12%. Are you guys with me? But in the treatment services, we are seeing almost 1/4 of them. In other words, there's something going not quite right. Of course, we celebrate the hard work they do. The second thing is, I think with our clinical experience, we know very, very likely we people don't go to seek help not until the last minute. So in other words, when you look at this figure, 25% going out to seek help, there will be a significant portion they are already affected adversely by gambling, but they are not in the space of receiving help. And the other thing is back to 2006, when I was still in New Zealand, we did some estimation of our clinical service data as well. In fact, it's not estimation, we examined the data. Back to 2006, that time, the Asian population percentage of clients we are seeing was about 7%, okay? Listen carefully. With only 7% clients identified as Asian we were seeing back to 2006. But when we look at the money loss they self-report in the intake interview, we are seeing up to 43% money loss reported by the Chinese. Are you guys with me? So only 7% clients we are seeing, but in fact, the money loss, the clients presenting services self-report account for 43% of the money loss. So in other words, again, it's a picture that, in this case, Chinese people, Asian people are affected disproportionately by gambling. What we are seeing here is qualitatively, it's not just a figure, we're talking about people from diverse backgrounds. And here, I think is a useful kind of a profile of people we are seeing. The like of people working in food industry, the like of early settlers, in particular the older people, and also the business people, they have large sum of money at their disposal, is very tempted to put the money into gambling. The third kind of evidence I want to show quickly is a piece of work also actually partly led by Nancy back to 2009. The amazing sort of finding in this study was very much a very unique opportunity to look at, in this case, Native American/Asian with the same identical environment and context, and to compare how the Native Americans and also Asians are doing. And in this case, we are seeing they have elevated percentage of gambling problems or problem gambling. So in other words, it's another piece of material to support, well, people are not doing very well. For those who are very interested in looking at Chinese gambling through a socio-historical cultural perspective, I encourage you to go to this article I co-author with Fiona and also Alex from the US. It's quite an interesting piece of work. My last sort of material I want to share with you is this letter. This was a letter myself and also Dr. Paul Wong and Joe Tang. We wrote to the journal Addiction. For those who are the academics in the audience, you will know very well Addiction is the top journal in the field of addiction. In this case, we wrote to the journal, and we alert that in Hong Kong at the time, in the year 2014, something happening miserably wrong. What happened was 4 suicides in Hong Kong were found to be related to football betting and also unmanageable debt within 8 days of the fever in mid-June 2014. We wrote this piece of letter to the journal and want to share with their audience. I want to let you know the letter was rejected because they thought, well, what does it mean? I mean, is similar things happening, for example, around the world in different jurisdictions? So we took the letter back and did more work. And basically what we did, or what we wrote for the rest of the letter, was we did some dirty Google search, and basically we were not able to find anything similar, so intense and sad over really, in this case, sort of 8 days windows. And 4 people died, and we can attribute that to gambling and also debt. Again, it is another piece of information suggesting people, in this case Chinese people, are not doing very well. Folks, I really want to share this material with you. We agree, we disagree. And I hope it will be a material we can start and continue the discourse on the topics. What I want to do now is sort of subsection 2. I said earlier I want to share with you 2 concepts, 2 tools I believe perhaps will help us to better understand the gambling phenomena, in this case Chinese or the Asian population. I think about 2 concepts. Number 1 is loneliness. Number 2, losing face. You may not be aware the significance, the gravity of my quote here. Loneliness is like an iceberg. It goes deeper than what we can see. John is a social scientist. In other words, he studied the brain very successfully, but at the same time studying how the brain interacts or has impact on someone's social interaction. So with his expertise and studies and so forth, that is the conclusion he draws. What we mean by loneliness, I use the word referring to loneliness is a sense of alienation, a sense of anxiety, a massive sense of emptiness. Not only that, I feel marginalized. I don't belong to any group. And lastly, such a sense of restless as well. So I would like to argue loneliness is a concept. You and I can think about it when we are working with clients affected by gambling in this case. And loneliness is an increasingly popular topic, and the UK has in fact established a loneliness commission to look at these particular topics. The other thing is I want to argue another useful tool, in my view, is to understand how Chinese people, in this case, losing face. Gambling is absolutely glamorous, okay? Such a joy thing and colorful and movie-like kind of thing to do. It is only so bad when I lost money. It is only so bad when I lost money to the extent I am regarded as pathological, okay? Not only pathological, but now I have to admit the failure. I lost so much, I need to see someone. I argue losing face is a useful concept to understand where your clients comes from. In order to sort of capture what I mean by face, I also want to suggest maybe to put face into 3 concepts. I play with the words P, and I will argue face very much equate to perceived status. In this case, we give face with respect. So thank you, give face to me to come to this keynote. Without you, I speak to no one. So thank you for giving me the face. Perceived status often associated with wealth or hierarchy or someone in the ladder. The other concept you may like to sort of think about is the concept of privilege, okay? I give you face, not because you have massive wealth or you are Lee Ka-sing, okay? But I give you face because the privilege you and I can share. So privilege in this case may be to do with connection, okay? Because I know you, you know me, and we belong to a particular elite group. And then the third one is pride, okay? Pride. And because of the pride, I feel I should have faith from you. Because of pride, you should give me faith, okay? And pride in this case is truly subjective. I don't necessarily have a lot of money. I don't necessarily have a lot of wealth, okay? But subjectively, I have a pride inside me. Think about it as the father, as the husband, as a grandfather. I feel the proud and I want respect. So I think as a clinician, as a practitioner, if we understand the notion of proud, the notion of faith, by giving respect, you are able to engage your clients. I carry on to say faith is a useful concept and tool in understanding, number one, the harms caused by gambling to Chinese people. I also want to draw your attention when we use the face as a clinical tool, as a concept. I want you to think about the phenomena of many faces. What about doing some drawing, if appropriate, with your clients? Hey, Mr. Wong, you have a face of winning. Tell me, how does it look? You have a face of losing. You have a face of worrying, depressing, annoying. You have the face of even thinking to harm yourself. Tell me, how do those faces look like? The second thing is having the face concept, you and I can understand the stigma. The social stigma people place on me. I lost hair, I lost money, and I lost money so bad, I become a pathological gambler. What is important, though, is also the concept of self-stigmatized. In other words, you don't necessarily stigmatize me, but I stigmatize myself. That is also bad, not helpful. And then the third one is by embracing the face concept, by paying respect to people from this particular population group, you and I are able to engage. You see, we need to respect the clients. It would be incredibly helpful, isn't it? To respect, to be playing our empathetic understanding. So think about it, face may be a useful concept. And here I want to acknowledge the work by Professor Heath, and actually she published a beautiful article on stigma and problem gambling. He is among one of our presenters in the conference. Find her, talk to her. Okay, what I want to do now is the third session of my tip of iceberg material. In this session, I want to go beyond the gambling and to start to look at mental health and coexisting issues. Very much what I try to understand, what I try to present here is the dynamics, the interaction, the bidirectionality between mental health and also problem gambling. Slide number one, I argue gambling, mental health, they share some common factors. The like of I don't cope well, I may become mentally unwell, or I start to gamble. Cognitive dysfunction, I believe I can control, or I maximize the thinking of winning. For example, that may drive me to gamble. The third reason, common reason, is losing control. Losing control with my emotion, I become manic, I become depressed. Losing control with my behavior, I gamble excessively. And then the last one is the role of neurotransmitter. And these are the two very good articles for those who want to embark on this journey, understanding the dynamics of between the two topics. The second slide I want to share with you is this time I argue, in some cases, problem gambling exists first before developing mental illness. How does it work? I mean, how come someone with gambling problems somehow further developing mental problems? My understanding of the literature, and also I'd like to draw your attention, in those years, I did some work in Singapore, and in this work, we are able to did a survey of 3,000 people and interviewing 39 people qualitatively. So my following speculations based on literature and also some of my earlier research work. My speculations are the following: why problem gambling somehow drives people to develop mental health problems. My speculations are the following: largely to do with heavy debt and loan shark that make people very agitated, very restless. Guilty feeling, chronic struggle leading to what? Chronic depression often. And also mood swings, social isolation is very bad associated with gambling. That obviously, in a lot of cases, exacerbates the mental symptoms. And also poor health and well-being. I don't eat well, I don't do exercise, I do nothing but gambling, not good at all. And then the last one I argue is if I am bad, if I do some criminal behaviors, will also drive me to not a good mental health place. And in this case, we are talking about an array of mental health issues. We have comorbid problems, we have mental illness. In this case, depression is the #1. And I want to ask the question, what about the subclinical states? In other words, I gamble, my mood becomes not good. I may not warrant the full diagnosis of depression, but what about the massive, troubling, depressive symptoms I'm experiencing? So all those things we need to think about. Lastly, on this slide, I want to draw your attention, making reference to Chinese people, Asian people, and so forth. I argue the yellow thorns, things perhaps concern them even more. I have money, I bring money to the country, but I lost money. At the same time, I'm underemployed, I'm unemployed. I'm in big trouble, okay? International students, I don't only lost money for my university tuition fee, but also I lost my parents' saving and also their retirements. Are you guys with me? We are talking about something very concerning. I want to draw your attention. Yesterday, I attended a session presented by Professor Glenn Harrison, and he is in the audience. Good morning, Glenn. And I enjoy his paper massively. Go to talk to him, okay? I whispered to myself, perhaps he should be one of the keynotes. Anyway, it's too late, okay? What is interesting is Glenn did some very interesting work, and basically he argues, on the one hand, we are seeing there is such a high percentage comorbidity, meaning when I gamble excessively, become a pathological gambler, literature suggests there is a high correlation with an array of mental problems. Are you guys with me? Depression, anxiety disorder, and so forth. But Glenn's work suggests maybe we need to be more cautious, at least on 2 grounds. #1, people may lie, okay? So I may not declare truthfully about my gambling situation, then I will not go further with the screening. #2, when we look at some of the analysis closely, they only allow one disorder at one time. But in real life, you and I know that I can have depression, but at the same time, I can have anxiety problem. At the same time, I drink a lot. Are you guys with me? Taking all those considerations, Glenn argued maybe we should be more reserved in our estimation. Even with that caveat, I think Glenn's work suggests also that there will be at least 2 things very worrying. For example, in this case, mood, in particular, chronic depression. How to interpret the figure? Here we go. If we compare people with gambling problem and people without gambling problem, we are saying people with gambling problem, the chance of having long-term depression is 1.5 times higher. And then likewise, we are also seeing some figure here about personality disorder. The chance of having personality difficulties comparing between problem gambling and also people without problem gambling is about 1.5 times higher, okay? So really, we are seeing a picture we need to think quite carefully. Okay, the third slide I want to show quickly is I argue, or based on the literature, we know in some cases people in fact have mental health problems before problem gambling, okay? I have depression, I have anxiety disorder, I have stress disorder, and so forth. But over time, I also develop problems in gambling, okay? How does it work? I mean, what may be the pathway, so to speak? And here we go. And the pathway is like this, or the argument is like this. People use gambling to mask the mental health issues, okay? I gamble excessively to mask the depression. I gamble excessively to mask some of the restlessness. What I want to draw your attention is the second layer of analysis. How it works is like this. When I am depressed, when I have bipolar, I have high propensity to participate in gambling. Why? Because I have bipolar, I am not employed. If I'm not employed, what should I do? So much time, gambling. Equally, I have bipolar, I have psychosis, I don't have many friends, so very limited friends. If those friends gamble, may drive me to gamble excessively. Do I make sense? And the other thing is obviously I may gamble in order to have fun. And again, I highlight those two yellow things to represent those are the things in particular concerning the migrants community. I am depressed, I'm worrying, I have adjustment disorder, but at the same time, I don't have a job, difficult to find a job. So my chance of being driven to gambling is quite high. So those are the words I'd like to offer to you for further kind of reflection. I very much want to finish this session very quickly. And very much we are talking about a reciprocality, a bidirectionality between problem gambling and also mental health problems. There is a link, definitely. And also, secondly, the exact pathway remains speculation. If we want to do good research, this will be a very good topic. And then the other thing is we are still unsure about the causality and which one happens first. We are not entirely sure. For those who are interested in this question, I'd like to invite you to read this very, very good article, seminal piece of work published back to the early 2000s by Alex and also Leah. And they talk about 3 pathways for people sort of becoming a problem gambler. And also, when we look at the whole thing about problem gambling and also mental health, the issue of bidirectionality, how one affects others is a very important issue. Would you agree as a clinician, a client may come to you, look, I'm already on medication, antipsychotic medication, antidepressants. The doctor tells me my depression is improving, but why? Why? What happens to my gambling? The gambling behavior doesn't seem to change. Okay, are you guys with me? So whether those two things sort of work together or one affects the other when we come to treatment may bother the clients, may also puzzle the clinicians as well. So on that note, we need to do more work. And of course, the best thing you and I can do is to work empathetically and skillfully with our clients. What I want to do is I want to charge to the second topic, content. Warning-Iceberg ahead. I like this quote. I changed it in order to suit the occasion. Iceberg in the world forces you and I, including myself and members of the audience, to pause and think. Iceberg is not an object of recognition. It's an iceberg. But a fundamental encounter. An encounter you and I need to change our course of action. Otherwise, we're getting into a disaster. On that note, I argue we need a disruptive innovations. We need a disruptive innovations. We need to do something different. Folks, I want to let you know, I think very hard on these topics. I argue we should not be business as usual. You may ask, Samson, by the way, what do you have to offer? I want to offer the following humbly. The first thing is we need to have a strong program to reduce stigma, because the mental health arena I work for almost 30 years now. Stop guessing how old I am. Okay, so we know removing stigma is very important. I will say if we really truly want to address the issue of gambling and mental health issues, the stigma is important. In New Zealand, we have such a successful Like Mind program. We should do the same. We should do the same. Especially when we listen to some of the WHO figures, we are seeing the increasing level of concern. Number two, I argue we need to treat the whole person. I realize, I admit, it's such a cliche to say that. Of course, Samson, we are doing it. What is new here? Well, I don't know. I guess we need to think about it in a very serious way. In our intake form across the nation, do we have specific columns to register clients' strength? I'm talking about doing it systematically. What about the strength in relationship, in managing finance, in your accommodation, in your occupation, in your faith, in your culture? Are we doing it systematically or just playing words? I argue if you and I truly adopt strength-based practice, what about our supervision? What about our clinical case meeting? How often we truly give time to strength? I don't know. Obviously, you know about the acronym PIN, P-I-N, Personal Identity or Identification Number. This morning, I want to offer you acronym of different kind. PIM. Do we know the client's purpose? Do we know the client's identity? Do we know the client's meaning of life? Do we do it robustly in our day-to-day clinical work? Policy people in the audience, do you want to think about including those columns in our national statistics? That will make people do it properly. Well, the last argument, or second last argument, is our family is incredibly important. I mean, over the last 30 years' work, my sincere reflection is without involving family or the concerned significant others, CSO, I think our intervention work is not going anywhere. Of course, please believe me, I do have some appreciation how hard it is to engage family, no question asked. But I think the question, the challenge I want to pose to the audience is how hard have we tried to engage the family or concerned significant others? How robust we have been doing in engaging family? In Hong Kong, I've been doing some 5 steps work, and it is a work it's a manualized program for people, for family members affected by addiction. So you may want to pay attention to that. And the last one I want to propose is involving peers in our intervention work. It was such a lovely occasion to be part of the lived experience panel. Were you guys there? The lived experience panel. I remember there was a question from the floor about, hey, what about peers? Peer is defined as someone who helps others with similar experience by using the person's lived experience. Peer support has the following advantages. Number one, I can relate to you very well. The level of empathy, acceptance is very high. I can do it much better than the regular health professionals. Number two, peer workers have good survival successful tips. Clinicians, we don't do relaxation, do you? Do you do meditation? You don't. Okay, I'm sorry. But peers, they have their practical life skills to help their peers to survive, to excel, to succeed. And then the third advantage a peer can do or can offer, can add value, is they know how to navigate through the system. You and I may not know how hard a person outside the system to navigate the addiction and mental health system. That is exactly what the peer can do. Think about it, guys. I mean, New Zealand can be innovative again, lead the world, and we have a new emerging peer support workforce. I am very aware that the Asian Family Service is embarking on this journey, and perhaps I'm sure there are people doing exactly that. I am incredibly sorry if I don't acknowledge your work. Guys, here is my suggestion to think about disruptive innovation. Those are a couple of things. What I want to do is to fight through the rest of the slide. I know we are going to finish very soon. The conclusion is let's act locally and think globally towards future plan for actions because we care. In order to go to the future, I want to suggest another 5 things, okay? What I mentioned earlier, the disruptive innovation should be the short-term thing in the next 3 or 5 years. But over the 10 years, for example, I argue in order to tackle addiction, mental health, and also comorbid conditions, number 1, we should think about One Health. One Health, not only the major mainstream population, but also the migrants, the international students, the migrant workers, refugees, etc., etc. Indigenous people. Building on biculturalism, we build One Health for the nation, for the country. We should think about creative, not only creative. What I learned from Rebecca and also Vladimir, the first keynote, is not only about creative solutions, but also courageous solutions to be different, to be ethical, to be powerful, to be evidence-based, okay? So creative and courageous solution. Number 2, digital and 5G world. I'm sure the gambling industry will embrace on that. What about intervention? We should take value, we should take advantage of the digital and the 5G world. What about the short-term, long-term? We need to have precision in helping people managing depression, managing gambling, but at the same time, we need some long-term methods to help people to maintain the wellness. And then the last one, I think, is quality research. We need good data to inform our practice. We need good data to monitor how well we are doing or otherwise. That is a hope to recover from gambling disorder and mental health problem. Learning to get life back on track and stay on track is exactly what we seek to do. What I would like to say is there are a lot of things we don't know about gambling, mental health, and also comorbid disorder or comorbid condition. We are still at the tip of the iceberg. I'd like to suggest we need to see a little deeper and continue to learn from the clients we work with, continue to learn from the research participants we engage in our study. And to conclude, I'd like to say, dear friends and colleagues, the reasons why we do what we do are of more importance than the doing themselves. Make sense? And I'd like to invite you to re-celebrate, reclaim, rekindle our initial commitment to the field, our integrity, and also our identity. Be it a practitioner, be it a scholar, be it a policy planner. And let's create connections with people individually, collectively, and create change for people's life. And on this note, I want to thank you and also my email there. And again, wish you a happy Chinese New Year. Max, if I may, can I just say that? Guys, what I have done is I have created something on the website. I'm sure you are so hungry to look at your mobile phone. Can you do that now? What I want you to do is take out your mobile phone and to go to www.minty.com. Go there, okay? Once you get there, can you input 382232, and then you will have a space to type in something. What I have invited people to do is can you share one thing you may change in your thinking or in your behavior. It's not about being self-important. In fact, the change you make, maybe you make in your thinking or behavior, nothing to do with my lecture, okay? But I think as a shared community, would be lovely, you and I to share, and then we will look at the screen together. Thank you, Max. Code, yeah, we need to see the code again. Are you guys okay?
Just before we do, I'd like to thank you very much for the presentation. You mentioned at the outset that whilst you were focusing in part on the experience of Chinese migrants, that it would have much wider relevance. And if I was to try and sum this session up, I really couldn't, because you touched on so many really important issues. And it did remind me of the words of Clyde Clockholm, an anthropologist from the States of many years back, who said, in some ways, each of us is like all other people, like some other people, and like no other person. So we all share something as human beings. We share a lot. But in other ways, we're just like some other people, people in a particular ethnic group, community, social, our occupation, and we share elements in common. But in other ways, each of us is a unique human being and can only be understood as a unique human being. And I think these were messages that came through in different ways. And you also reminded us of the diversity. There's been some focus on Indigenous people. You also reminded us of sojourners like international students, vast numbers of people. This university has something like 4,000 or 5,000 international students. Very important and often overlooked. And refugees and asylum seekers, again, and displaced persons. Very vulnerable groups, and I think often are not considered. And I think you've reminded us of that and the importance of that. And many other words of wisdom. One thing I would say, there are a number of longitudinal studies underway worldwide, very large ones. Most of the findings have yet to be reported in journals. They're in the grey literature, and they confirm what you were saying about the sequence of mental health issues and addiction issues preceding the onset of gambling problems, but also following them. These studies are now tracking this over time and looking at connections, and Ulla gave a presentation on some of this from Sweden, but it's yet really to hit the academic journals, because we've been too busy doing the research and reporting to other people. But anyway, I'll stop there and open this up for questions, and we've run a little bit late, so be it. Some questions up there. Back there.
Prof Samson Tse from Deakin University. We're just embarking on a study with 8 local government areas looking at older adults. So we've been really influenced by the work that you've done, so thank you for that. I wanted to pick up on 2 of your slides, the one about disruptive innovation, and the one about gambling venues being an inclusive space for people.
Right.
I wonder if you've done any thinking about the strategies that industry uses to pull people into the venues, to create a pathway for older adults, cheap meals, sporting activities and so on. And what are some of your thoughts about how we disrupt those pathways for those groups?
Wow, it's a very disruptive question. I am not able to offer too much a solution, but I just want to echo with you. I think you are making a very good observation. I guess on the one hand, we always say migrants, Asians, Chinese, they have gambling in their blood, okay? I don't know whether the genetic study has confirmed that or what. Of course, I think what Kelly mentioned earlier in your pre-performance speech, that often within Chinese culture, we seem to pair gambling with celebration of Chinese New Year. That is one pathway to explain. But I think you're making another observation, which is in some cases, Asians, migrants, international students alike, we are being targeted by the industry to drive to their venue to gamble. And this is something we should examine, we should look at very, very seriously. I'm sure they are doing it legally, but I think there is a great deal of room for improvement. My one humble observation, I mean, yesterday, New Zealand Herald, you possibly see a good one page talking about the celebration of Chinese New Year. Again, the photo with Sky City at the backdrop. I have no idea why Sky City, I'm sorry if any colleagues from Sky City, but it's my humble question. I'm not sure why Sky City continues to monopolize the celebration of Chinese New Year.
I think the reason's really obvious. Robin?
There are big differences between ethnicities.
Yes.
For instance, in alcohol, Chinese are fairly low
Yes.
compared with, say, Anglo-Saxons.
Absolutely.
Like that, And, in the several multicultural societies I've lived in, the Chinese come in high on gambling.
Right.
Chinese, it put me in mind of how much does this have to do with things that are built into the culture, not about necessarily the genes, but about the culture. And, if you think about one of the interesting things I discovered about Gamblers Anonymous when we did studies of the 12-step groups,
Yes.
was Gamblers Anonymous is the only one that doesn't have a higher power.
Right.
And that's attributed often to the fact that one of the founders was a militant atheist. But I think it's deeper than that.
Right.
A habitual gambler believes all too much in a higher power. And I wonder whether the Confucianism in here, that's entangled in Chinese culture, that kind of notion of putting your life in the hands of a higher power, to some extent, could that be what's going on?
I think it could be many, many multiple explanations, but maybe we should engage that conversation after the conference. People talk about the history, people talk about the political, and also the cultural practices strongly associated with gambling. So, yeah.
Well,
Just one comment about the close, I think, until we need to close for but just one comment. In the studies in New Zealand, Asian people have very low rates of gambling, very, very low rates, but very high rates of problem gambling relative to the number that gamble. And that's just some extent true specifically. We have low participation rates overall, but very high risk for those who do. And there are all sorts of reasons for that, which you've touched on quite a lot of time. But I just wanted to mention that because it's not that Asian New Zealanders gamble more, they don't. Those that do gamble
Yes.
and account for a lot of the, as you said, a lot of the expenditure.
thank you very much.
Sorry,
Thank you very much.